Have you ever felt chills running down your spine or heard whispers in the dead of night? Today, we're diving into spine-tingling stories shared on Reddit about the creepiest encounters people have had in haunted abandoned buildings. From eerie footsteps to ghostly apparitions, these tales will make you think twice about exploring the unknown. Turn off the lights, settle in, and get ready for some terrifying tales that might just haunt your dreams. Let's dive in.
U/Klex_Ace responded. Several years ago, a man was murdered in the city I was working in, and parts of his body were turning up at various locations. I think his hand and foot had been found and a week had passed. I'm an architectural designer and I was surveying an abandoned chapel that was slated to be renovated into condos. It was apparent that homeless people had been squatting in the chapel, but I wasn't sure how recently they had been there. When I went into the basement though, it was clear someone was either there or had just left based on the smell. There were no lights due to the power being cut, and I didn't stick around long enough to see if anyone was currently occupying the space. 2 days later someone reported that they found the torso and head of the murdered man in a building attached to the chapel. I had been too freaked out by the smell in the basement to continue on to the attached building. But I'm almost certain I would have been the one to find the body. U/Mercuria Retrograda responded. Exploring an abandoned manor with some friends. We had been drinking and smoking and thought it would be cool. The ground floor entrances were covered with bricks, so we had to enter through the first floor, 8 feet height, using an improvised ladder made of old trash and wood pieces. It was quite unstable and hard to climb, and we were 5 or 6 people. Being the only way out, and knowing how slow it was, I was on edge the whole time. We were exploring the floor, cool glass ceiling, lots of debris, but suddenly we find a room filled with plastic containers with pink and brown liquids. Some friends decide to explore the ground floor, which was pitch black and involved going down a broken staircase missing several steps. They heard someone coughing in the dark and feel several people moving in the darkness as their eyes get used to it. At this point I was hearing someone slowly walking in a room on the first floor, carefully stepping over the broken glass on the floor, to not make noise, which was really creepy. We got the fuck away, and on our way out we saw a roughed up man with bloodshot eyes leaving a shack outside the house and staring at us. I still shiver when I remember his look. Probably just some junkies living there, but for overly high 15-year-olds it was scary as fuck. U/Mr. Funktastic responded. Wow, I can't believe I have a place to tell this story. When I was in middle school we went upstate in the summer. There was an abandoned house in the woods we explored. Top floor was pretty pristine, the beds were made and drawers closets shut with stuff neatly arranged inside. There were bats. The lower you went the more disordered. The basement garage was in complete disarray. Books and random crap thrown around. Beer cans and used condoms. We went to the far end of the house where the wall partially collapsed, and that's when we saw the bear. Foolishly ran with all our might. Thankfully the house between us and bear's lack of interest is why I'm typing this. U/Justified Andrescent responded. I do urban exploring quite frequently, and nothing ever makes us leave instantly apart from dodgy floors or squatters. However, 5 years ago me and a few friends explored a derelict farmhouse with outbuildings which had evidently been left for decades with the state it was in. After having a look around the place and finding nothing but empty buildings, we had a look inside what appeared to be an old stable. Inside was literally hundreds of empty tins of cat food, some nooses tied to a beam, and a fairly new pair of scissors with a brownish crust covering the blades. The smell was putrid. We ventured further into the building and noticed on the flood was a cat's tail and a few cat's paws which had been dismembered and left on the floor. We swiftly exited, and on our way out a pickup pulled up onto the side of the farm, bearing in mind it was surrounded by woods and fields with no track leading to it, with 3 men stood in the bed. Needless to say we got out of there as quick as we could and haven't seen or heard anything about it. The farm went on the market and sold earlier this year, so it would be interesting to see who previously owned it.
U/Hairlisa responded. Used to fuck around this massive property that consisted of 3 gigantic factory buildings right next to a big strip mall plaza. It was pretty popular because the cops never cared enough to patrol, so the whole place was completely covered in really amazing graffiti. Once our group of 9 visited just after a tropical storm that knocked out power in most of the state. We thought it'd be sick to go stargaze up on the roof. To get up, you have to crawl through this partially collapsed passageway and then climb 3 stories up an old ladder. A few minutes after we all got up, a waterlogged section of roof started collapsing and we all had to scramble on top of each other to get down the ladder, with a few people basically falling part of the way down. We managed to crawl out of the passageway part just as some metal parts of the roof started crashing down. Decided we probably shouldn't stick around and find out how much more water damage the storm had done. Still continued to visit for several years until the property changed hands and a security guard was hired to watch it, but never dared to go on the roof again and definitely never went after rainstorms. You/Evelina responded, "There's an abandoned old cabin in the middle of the woods that's near my house. I believe it's from the early 1900s, and it's falling apart and blocked off by the rangers. But they don't really patrol this forest, so it's easy to jump the gate and hike up to the cabin. I decided to explore one day and climbed up the rotting deck to the main cabin. It was so dark and musty with broken glass and acorns everywhere. I went deeper into the cabin to explore the different rooms. As I was walking around, I started to hear a rustling noise. Me being a dumbass, I started to walk closer to the sound. I moved a rotting board over to the side and a fucking squirrel leapt out and attached itself to my sweater. I start screaming and grabbed the squirrel with my hands and threw it off me. I ran out of that cabin and never looked back. I still pass the cabin when I hike with my dog, but LVE learned my lesson. It belongs to the forest now." You/Vanek responded, "Stumbled upon an arson in progress and didn't realize it until the place was burned down the next day. My friends and I used to explore a lot of abandoned places many years back, still do from time, and our favorite place to visit was Woodville State Hospital in Pittsburgh. For a couple years we would make frequent trips up there and sneak in and explore. It was so massive, there was always something different to check out. Well, one evening we go up there and we hear noises, like someone breaking things. We figure it's a couple other kids just being assholes and vandalizing things. But when we tried to find who was responsible, we couldn't find anyone around. Apparently they noticed us and decided to sneak away before we got too close to the main building. We didn't think too much of it until we got inside the main building, the one with the giant bell tower and chapel and such. The entire main room had been filled with debris, and this was a huge room. Broken pianos and tables and chairs and pallets, etc., had all been dragged into this giant main room and scattered all around into a giant pile. This freaked us out quite a bit, as we recognized most of the items in the pile, and it would have taken a lot of effort, most definitely more than one person, to gather all of these items up from around the grounds and place them all in here. We didn't understand why people would do this, and it freaked us the fuck out, so we ran out of there. The next day, shortly after sundown, I get a call from my best friend, all in a panic, yelling for me to turn on the news. So I tune in and see live coverage of Woodville burning to the ground. All of the big buildings had been set ablaze. The debris we saw getting piled up was used as fuel to commit arson. Apparently we interrupted them that day, so they fled and then did it the next day. You/Hendemum responded, "A friend and I were exploring an abandoned mental facility that had been purchased by a large computer company here in Silicon Valley. The compound was massive. It had its own sheriff, slaughterhouse, industrial mechanic shop, on-site homes for the employees, everything a small town would have in addition to the hospital, school, and a beautiful mansion. All but the mansion were being demolished. The hospital had some creepy, though typical of the time, rooms and equipment, etc. Went through every house, storage unit, outbuilding on the property and found some amazing things, with nothing negative of any kind happening. Then we went into the library. We went up a spiral staircase into the belfry. I think that's what it's called. From the minute we entered the building I was nervous and uncomfortable. On the way up we'd passed rooms full of books and were going to check them out on the way out. There was no one else on the property, and the staircase was made of narrow metal stairs. From the top of the stairs you could see all the way to the bottom. We both heard footsteps coming up the stairs, but when we looked no one was there. We looked in all the rooms on the way down and nothing. There was no other way in or out. Suddenly I was filled with a terror LV never felt before or since. I'm not religious but began praying for my life. We left immediately and the feeling stopped once we left the building. My friend felt something, she said, but not to the level I did. No idea what happened there. It was truly bizarre. You/Darnet917 responded, "Got into an old cement factory with a few friends 15 years ago. No smartphone, no fancy gadgets. Just a halogen flashlight and each other. We walked around for hours. The basement was flooded and the water crystal clear, everything heavy still in place. Surreal. Climbed the staircase at one end of the factory up to a room that had huge motors inside, black filthy windows and a weird smell. Started to walk into the darkest area of the rooms up there and the smell got worse and worse. Found a smashed window pane for some air and light. Shouted for my mates to come to me so we could share the flashlight and look around properly. First mate comes up and freezes. Second mate, with the light already on and aimed straight at me, gagging and covering his face. Pigeons hanging from the walls and carcasses on the floor, a huge symbol scratched and painted on wall. The windows black, probably from the blood of these poor birds. We noped out of that room pretty quick. Fuck knows who had been there messing with birds like that. Turns out the smell was likely death and rotting animals.
U/Hattix responded. Being near Sheffield, there are quite a few abandoned steelworks, a real diesel punk aesthetic going on. I'm not going to say where this one is, for safety reasons you're about to read. There's scrap steel and iron stacked at one end of the building, rollers, a furnace, some offices. The sort of thing you see in a 1920s-ish steelworks, proud of its 15-hour days, 6 days a week, for boys and lads. Then, as we're stepping forward, the floor appears to be sagging. We weren't aware of any subsurface structure in this factory. Still, maybe it had boilers or something. In hindsight, we should have known something was amiss at this point, as the colors of the corrosion on the iron were different, blacks and greens. One of the group gets the idea to throw some of the scrap iron down a hole in the sagged area to see how deep it goes. There's a lot of abandoned medieval bell pit works and slant mines nearby, as well as being worked since antiquity for both ironstone and coal. When urbexing, we know to keep the hell away from mines, as we're in an area known for damps. The characteristic metal-on-rock sound rings out several times, then some metal-on-metal clangs, and finally a muffled metal-on-rock thud. Wherever that scrap went, it was deep. The corroded metals near the sagged floor were telling us what it was, sulfates, most probably, telling us that mine damp was around. It seems the steelworks had been built atop an abandoned mine, knowingly or not. Knowing mine shafts rarely existed alone, we very carefully and very quickly got the hell out of that building. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one. If you enjoyed this video and want to dive even deeper into our community, consider becoming a channel member. Members get exclusive perks like early access to videos, custom emojis, shoutouts, etc. And it's a great way to support the channel so I can keep bringing you the content you love.